She was just a kid in row 8 when the Cessna's engine exploded. The pilot collapsed. The plane started falling toward the mountains. Everyone was screaming. Then she stood up, walked to the cockpit, and grabbed the microphone. Her voice was calm. "Mayday. I'm 11 years old and I'm going to land this plane. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories." Sarah Chen was 11 years old, and she hated flying alone. But here she was, sitting in seat 8B on a small Cessna aircraft, flying from Seattle to Denver with nobody she knew. Her mom had put her on the plane that morning with a tight hug and worried eyes. "The flight attendants will take care of you, sweetie," her mom had said. "Your dad will meet you at the airport in Denver." Sarah nodded, but inside she felt scared. This was her first time flying alone on such a small plane. Her parents had recently separated, and now she had to travel between two homes. She didn't like this new life, but nobody asked what she wanted. The Cessna was tiny. It only had space for 8 passengers. Sarah counted the seats as she walked down the narrow aisle. Rows 1 through 4, 2 seats on each side. She had seat 8B, which was the very last seat on the right side. From there, she could see the whole cabin. A pilot stood near the cockpit door. He looked about 50 years old with gray hair and a friendly smile. His name tag said, Captain Mike Wilson. "First time on a small plane?" he asked Sarah. "Yes, sir," Sarah said quietly. "Don't worry. I've been flying for 30 years. We'll get you to Denver safe and sound." Sarah sat down and buckled her seatbelt. She pulled out her tablet, but there was no Wi-Fi on this small plane. She sighed and put it away. This was going to be a long flight. The other passengers boarded slowly. In row 1 sat Mr. Johnson, a businessman in a black suit. He was already reading papers before the plane even started moving. In row 2 sat Mrs. Garcia, an older woman with gray hair and a kind face. She wore a blue jacket and carried a large purse. Next to her sat Tom, a college student with messy brown hair and headphones around his neck. In row 3 sat Dr. Patel, a woman in her 40s wearing glasses and a doctor's coat. She was reading a medical journal. Next to her sat Mr. Lee, a quiet man in his 60s who looked out the window. That was everyone. Just 7 people on this small plane flying over the Rocky Mountains. Captain Wilson closed the door and walked into the cockpit. Sarah could see him through the open cockpit door. He was checking switches and buttons on the control panel. The instrument panel looked very complicated with many gauges and screens. The engine started with a loud roar that made Sarah jump. Mrs. Garcia turned around and smiled at her. "First flight, dear?" she asked. "First time alone," Sarah said. "Oh, you're very brave. I've flown this route many times to visit my grandchildren. The mountains are beautiful from up here." Sarah tried to smile back, but her stomach felt sick. She didn't feel brave at all. Captain Wilson's voice came through the speakers. "Good morning, everyone. This is Captain Wilson. We'll be taking off shortly. Our flight time today will be about 2 hours and 15 minutes. The weather looks clear, so we should have a smooth ride. Please keep your seatbelts fastened." The plane started moving across the runway. Sarah looked out her window at the small airport. Mountains rose up in the distance, covered with snow at the top. The sky was bright blue without any clouds. They stopped at the end of the runway. Sarah heard Captain Wilson talking on the radio. She couldn't understand all the words, but it sounded normal. Then the engine got very loud. The plane started rolling down the runway, going faster and faster. Sarah grabbed the armrests and held tight. Her heart was beating fast. She felt the moment when the wheels left the ground. Her stomach dropped as they lifted into the air. The plane tilted up and up. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Mrs. Garcia said. Sarah opened her eyes and looked out the window. They were already high above the ground. The airport looked like a toy below them. Cars on the highway looked like tiny ants. The mountains stretched out in every direction, covered with green trees and white snow. It was beautiful. Sarah had to admit that. She had never seen anything like this before. The plane leveled off and the engine noise became steady. Captain Wilson came back on the speaker. "We've reached our cruising altitude of 10,000 feet. You can relax now. If you need anything, just let me know." Sarah did relax a little. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. She pulled out a book from her backpack and tried to read, but it was hard to concentrate. She kept looking out the window at the amazing view. For the first hour, everything was fine. Mr. Johnson worked on his papers. Mrs. Garcia read a magazine. Tom listened to music. Dr. Patel studied her medical journal. Mr. Lee looked out the window. Sarah read her book and watched the mountains pass below. But then something changed. Sarah heard a strange sound from the engine. It was subtle at first, just a small change in the noise. But Sarah had good hearing. She played piano and could hear when notes were even slightly wrong. The engine sound was definitely wrong. She looked toward the cockpit. Captain Wilson was checking his instruments more carefully now. He touched some switches. His body looked tense. Sarah felt worried. She put down her book and listened carefully to the engine. The sound changed again. This time it was more obvious. The engine made a coughing noise, then went back to normal, then coughed again. Mr. Johnson looked up from his papers. "What's that noise?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, there was a loud bang from the front of the plane. The whole aircraft shook hard. The engine sound became rough and uneven, like a car engine that was breaking down. Mrs. Garcia gasped. Tom pulled off his headphones. Everyone looked toward the cockpit with fear on their faces. Captain Wilson spoke on the speaker, and now his voice was serious. "Folks, we're having some engine trouble. I'm going to need to make an emergency landing. Please make sure your seatbelts are tight and stay calm." But Sarah could hear worry in his voice. This wasn't a small problem. The engine got worse. It made terrible grinding noises and kept stopping for a few seconds at a time. Every time it stopped, the plane would drop a little and everyone's stomach would lurch. Sarah looked out the window. Below them was nothing but mountains and forest. No roads, no towns, no flat places to land. "Where are we going to land?" Mr. Johnson asked loudly. Captain Wilson was talking urgently on his radio. Sarah could hear parts of the conversation. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cessna November 234 Romeo declaring an emergency. Complete engine failure. Looking for somewhere to land. Engine failure. Complete engine failure." Those words made Sarah's heart race with fear. The radio crackled with a response. "Cessna 4 Romeo, nearest airport is Mountain Valley Airport, 35 miles northeast of your position." "Negative," Captain Wilson said. "I can't make 35 miles. I'm looking for options, but I don't see any good places. It's all trees and mountains." Mrs. Garcia started crying softly. Tom's face had gone pale. Mr. Johnson was gripping his armrest so hard his hands were shaking. The engine made one final terrible grinding noise and then stopped completely. The sudden silence was terrifying. Without the engine, the only sound was the wind whistling past the plane. They were gliding now, falling slowly toward the mountains with no power. Sarah watched Captain Wilson through the cockpit door. He was working hard, trying different switches, talking on the radio, looking for a place to land. She could see sweat on his face. Then it happened. Captain Wilson suddenly grabbed his chest. His face twisted in pain. He made a small sound and slumped forward against the controls. The plane immediately started turning to the left as his body pushed against the control wheel. Without someone flying it, they would crash into the mountains within minutes. Sarah stared in shock. The pilot was unconscious. They had no engine and no pilot. They were going to crash. For 3 seconds, Sarah sat frozen in her seat. Her mind was blank with terror. But then something clicked in her brain. A memory from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when Sarah was 9, something changed her life forever. Her older sister Amy died in a hiking accident. She was 14 and fell from a cliff during a family trip. Amy died instantly. After Amy died, Sarah stopped talking for 2 months. She went to school and came home, but she didn't speak. Her parents took her to doctors, but nothing helped. She was lost in her sadness. Then one day, her father brought home Amy's things from her bedroom. Most of it was normal teenager stuff, clothes, books, posters. But there was also a box of flight training books and magazines about airplanes. Sarah didn't know Amy had been interested in flying. But when she opened the books, she found notes in Amy's handwriting. Amy had been studying to become a pilot. She had books about how airplanes work, how to read instruments, and how to handle emergencies. Sarah started reading the books. At first, it was just because they had Amy's handwriting in them. But then she got interested in the actual content. Flying was like a puzzle, and Sarah loved puzzles. She read everything in Amy's collection. Then she found more information online. She watched hundreds of videos about flying. She joined online groups where real pilots talked about their work. She downloaded a flight simulator game on her tablet and practiced every night. Her parents thought she was just playing games. They didn't know she was seriously studying aviation. She never told them because she knew they would worry. They would think she was obsessed with flying because of Amy. But Sarah wasn't obsessed. She was just learning. And she was good at it. She spent 2 years studying. She learned how to read instruments, how to talk on the radio, how to handle emergencies. She practiced hundreds of landings on her flight simulator. She memorized the steps for engine failures and emergency landings. She never thought she would actually use this knowledge. It was just something she did to feel close to Amy, to understand what her sister had loved. But now, in this moment, with Captain Wilson unconscious and the plane falling toward the mountains, Sarah realized something important. She might be the only person on this plane who had any idea how to fly. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Garcia cried. "Sit down." Sarah didn't answer. She walked quickly to the front of the cabin. When she got close enough to see into the cockpit, she confirmed what she feared. Captain Wilson was slumped over, unconscious. He was breathing, but his eyes were closed. The plane was in a steep left turn, losing height fast. "Someone help him!" Mr. Johnson shouted. "He's having a heart attack." "I'll try," Tom said, unbuckling his seatbelt, but he looked terrified and confused. Dr. Patel rushed forward. "I'm a doctor. Let me check him." Sarah squeezed past them into the tiny cockpit. She had to push Captain Wilson back in his seat to reach the controls. His body was heavy and hard to move. "What are you doing?" Tom asked. "You're just a kid." Sarah didn't have time to explain. She grabbed the control wheel and turned it to the right. The plane immediately stopped the steep turn and began flying straight again. Then she pulled back gently on the wheel. The nose came up and they stopped dropping so fast. The plane was flying straight and level now, but they were still gliding down toward the mountains with no engine. "Oh my God," Mrs. Garcia said. "The little girl is flying the plane." Sarah's hands were shaking, but she kept them steady on the controls. The plane felt heavy and real, not like her simulator at all. She could feel the wind pushing against it. She had to make small adjustments constantly to keep it flying smoothly. She needed help. She needed to talk to someone on the ground who could guide her. Sarah picked up the microphone attached to the control panel. She pressed the button and spoke as clearly as she could. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cessna November 234 Romeo. The pilot is unconscious. I am a passenger and I need help landing this plane. There was a pause. Then a voice came back, full of confusion. Cessna 4 Romeo, please repeat. Did you say the pilot is unconscious? Yes, Sarah said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Captain Wilson had a medical emergency. He's unconscious. I'm flying the plane now, but I need someone to help me land it. Another pause. Cessna 4 Romeo, who is speaking? What is your name and what is your flight experience? Sarah took a breath. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 11 years old. I don't have a pilot's license, but I've been studying aviation for 2 years. I've practiced on flight simulators. I know the basics, but I've never flown a real plane before. Behind her, she heard Mr. Johnson say, an 11-year-old? We're going to die. But Mrs. Garcia said something different. Quiet. Let her concentrate. Dr. Patel was checking Captain Wilson's pulse. He's alive but unconscious. It looks like a heart attack. We need to get him to a hospital. A new voice came on the radio, calmer and more in control. Sarah, this is Robert Martinez. I'm a flight instructor and I'm here at Mountain Valley Airport. I'm going to help you through this. First, I need you to tell me what you see on your instruments. Sarah scanned the panel just like she had practiced hundreds of times on her simulator. The altimeter shows 8,200 feet. The airspeed indicator shows 95 knots. The attitude indicator shows we're level. The heading indicator shows 285 degrees. Perfect, Sarah. You're doing great. Now, the most important thing is to maintain the right airspeed for gliding. I want you to adjust your speed to 75 knots. Push the nose down gently until the airspeed needle points to 75. Sarah pushed forward on the control wheel until the airspeed showed 75 knots. The plane felt more stable immediately. Good, Robert said. That's your best glide speed. Now, how fast are you losing altitude? Sarah watched the altimeter for 1 minute. About 500 feet per minute. That's normal. Sarah, I need to ask you something important. How much do you really know about flying? I need to understand what you can do. Sarah thought carefully. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to sound like she knew nothing. I've studied aviation books and videos for 2 years. I know how airplanes work and how to read the instruments. I've practiced landings hundreds of times on a realistic flight simulator. I know I'm just a kid, but I understand the basic rules. I can follow instructions. There was a pause. Then Robert said, Sarah, I believe you. And I'm going to get you down safely. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Good. Now, I'm looking at a map of your area. There's a small airport called Pine Ridge Airport about 15 miles ahead of you. I think you can make it there. I'm going to guide you to that airport and we're going to land this plane together. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Behind her, Sarah heard Mrs. Garcia say quietly, You can do this, honey. We believe in you. For the next 15 minutes, Robert talked Sarah through every detail of flying toward Pine Ridge Airport. He explained how to make gentle turns, how to judge distance, how to manage altitude. Sarah listened to every word and followed every instruction. Her fear was still there, but it was pushed to the back of her mind. Right now, she had a job to do. Dr. Patel had moved Captain Wilson to a more comfortable position. He's breathing normally, she said. But we need to land soon. Tom had his phone out and was recording everything. "This is crazy," he kept saying. "This is absolutely crazy." But Mrs. Garcia stayed calm. She had moved to the seat right behind Sarah. "You're doing wonderfully, dear," she said. "Just keep listening to that nice man on the radio." Sarah saw the airport in the distance. It was tiny, just a single runway in a clearing surrounded by forest. There were a few small buildings and some parked planes. As they got closer, she could see emergency vehicles lining up near the runway. "I can see the airport," Sarah said into the microphone. "Excellent, Sarah. Now, I want you to fly over the airport so we can see the runway and check the wind. Don't try to land yet. Just fly straight over it." Sarah flew over Pine Ridge Airport at 7,500 feet. She could see people on the ground looking up at them. Fire trucks and ambulances were ready. "The wind is coming from the north at about 10 knots, Robert said. "You'll be landing on runway 36, which means you'll be landing into the wind. That's good. It will help slow you down." Sarah's heart was pounding hard. This was really happening. She was going to try to land an airplane. "Now, Sarah, I'm going to walk you through the landing step by step. The most important thing is to maintain your airspeed all the way to touchdown. If you go too slow, the plane will stall and drop. If you go too fast, you'll float down the runway and might run out of room. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now, fly past the airport and then make a wide left turn to line up with the runway. Take your time. There's no rush." Sarah flew past the airport and began a gentle left turn. Her hands were sweating on the control wheel, but she kept them steady. She could see the runway through the windscreen now, a long strip of gray concrete with white markings. 3 miles out, Robert said. "How does it look?" "I can see the runway. I'm lined up with it." "Perfect. Now, there's a lever on your left labeled flaps. Do you see it?" Sarah looked and found it. "Yes, I see it. When I tell you, I want you to move that lever to the first position. This will extend the flaps, which will slow you down and help you descend. But not yet. Wait for my instruction." Sarah's hands were shaking now. She could see individual people on the ground. She could see the numbers on the runway, 36, painted in huge white letters. 2 miles out, Robert said. "Now, Sarah, lower your flaps to the first position." Sarah moved the lever. She felt the plane slow down and the nose pitch up slightly. She had to push forward to keep descending toward the runway. "How does it feel?" Robert asked. "Different from the simulator, but I think I'm okay." "You're doing great. 1 mile out now. Lower the flaps to the second position." Sarah moved the lever again. The plane slowed even more. The runway was getting closer and closer. Behind her, everyone was silent. Nobody spoke. They just watched this 11-year-old girl trying to land an airplane. "Half a mile," Robert said. His voice was very calm. "You're looking good, Sarah. Keep your speed at 75 knots and aim for the numbers at the beginning of the runway." The ground was rushing up now. Sarah could see the runway markings clearly. Her heart felt like it was going to explode, but she kept her hands steady. 1/4 mile. You're almost there, Sarah. When you get close to the ground, you're going to pull back gently on the controls. This is called the flare. It will level the plane off just above the runway. But not yet. Wait until you're about 10 feet off the ground. Sarah's whole world had narrowed to the runway in front of her and Robert's voice in her ear. Nothing else existed. Get ready to flare. Slowly pull back. Gently, gently. Sarah pulled back on the control wheel, raising the nose of the plane. The descent slowed. For a moment, they were flying just a few feet above the runway. Hold it off. Let it settle on its own. The main wheels touched the runway with a firm bump. Sarah held the nose up until it settled down naturally. They were on the ground, rolling down the runway. "Brakes!" Robert shouted. "Push on the top of the rudder pedals." Sarah pushed her feet down on the brake pedals. The plane slowed quickly. Within seconds, they had rolled to a stop on the runway about halfway down. For a moment, there was total silence. Then Robert's voice came over the radio, and Sarah could hear emotion in it. "Cessna 4 Romeo, you are down and safe." "Sarah, that was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. You just saved 7 lives, including your own." The cabin erupted. Mrs. Garcia was crying and laughing. Mr. Johnson was clapping. Tom was shouting, "Oh my God, oh my God." Dr. Patel was smiling with tears in her eyes. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat, her hands still on the controls, and started shaking. Now that it was over, all the fear came flooding back. She had just landed an airplane, a real airplane, and everyone was alive. Within seconds, emergency vehicles surrounded the plane. Paramedics rushed on board to help Captain Wilson. Dr. Patel helped them move him carefully. "He had a heart attack," the lead paramedic said. "But he'll probably be okay. We need to get him to the hospital right away." Sarah climbed out of the pilot's seat on shaky legs. Mrs. Garcia hugged her tightly. "You saved us," the old woman said through her tears. "You brave, brave girl." Outside, Sarah was immediately surrounded by firefighters, paramedics, and airport workers. Everyone wanted to shake her hand and tell her how amazing she was. A man in a pilot's uniform pushed through the crowd. "Sarah," the man said. "I'm Robert Martinez. I was the one on the radio." Sarah looked at him. Robert was maybe 45 years old with short black hair and kind eyes. He knelt down so he was at Sarah's level. "Sarah, I've been a pilot and flight instructor for 20 years. What you just did was extraordinary. You should be incredibly proud." "I was so scared," Sarah said quietly. "Being scared is normal. But you stayed calm and followed instructions. That's what good pilots do." Robert paused. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Why did you know so much about flying?" Sarah told him about Amy, about the books she left behind, about the 2 years of studying. Robert listened carefully, and when Sarah finished, there were tears in his eyes. "Your sister would be so proud of you," Robert said. "And I bet she was watching over you today." The media arrived within an hour. News reporters with cameras and microphones crowded around Sarah. They all wanted to interview the 11-year-old girl who landed a plane. "How did you stay so calm?" one reporter asked. "I just did what I learned," Sarah said. "And I listened to Robert. He's the real hero. He talked me through everything." "Do you want to be a pilot when you grow up?" another reporter asked. Sarah thought about that question. Before today, she had never really considered it. The flying had just been a way to feel close to Amy. But now, having actually flown a real airplane, having felt the controls in her hands and the sky around her, something had changed inside her. "Yes," Sarah said. "I think I do want to be a pilot." Sarah's parents arrived at Pine Ridge Airport 3 hours later. They had driven from Seattle and Denver as fast as they could. Her mother was crying. Her father looked pale and shocked. "I had no idea you knew anything about flying," her mother said, hugging Sarah so tight she could barely breathe. "I learned from Amy's books," Sarah explained. "I've been studying for 2 years." Her father looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was respect. He was looking at her not as a child, but as someone who had done something remarkable. "Amy would be proud," her father said softly. "We're proud." The story went viral on the internet. Videos of the landing were shared millions of times. News networks ran stories about the miracle girl who saved 7 lives. Sarah's photo was on the front page of newspapers across the country. But the attention that meant the most came from the aviation community. Pilots from around the world sent Sarah messages of support and respect. The Federal Aviation Administration sent her a letter of recognition. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association gave her an award for courage. Robert Martinez became Sarah's friend and mentor. He offered to give Sarah free flight lessons when she was old enough to start official training. "You have natural ability," Robert told her. "With proper training, you could be an excellent pilot." Captain Mike Wilson recovered from his heart attack. When he was well enough, he met with Sarah at the hospital. "You saved my life," he said, shaking her hand. "And you saved everyone else on that plane. I've been flying for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did. Thank you." 6 months later, Sarah enrolled in a Civil Air Patrol cadet program. She studied aviation ground school and went on flights with licensed pilots. She learned radio communication, navigation, and emergency procedures, all the real training to go with the knowledge she had taught herself. Her relationship with her parents improved too. They stopped treating her like a child who couldn't handle difficult things. They respected her intelligence and her abilities. They supported her dream of becoming a pilot. Most importantly, Sarah stopped feeling so sad about Amy. She realized that by learning to fly, she had kept her sister's dream alive. Every time she went up in an airplane, Amy was with her. On the first anniversary of the emergency landing, Sarah went back to Pine Ridge Airport. Robert took her up for a flight lesson in a small Cessna similar to the one she had landed that day. They flew over the same mountains, the same forests. But this time, Sarah was in the pilot's seat by choice, not by emergency. She was learning to fly the right way, with proper instruction and supervision. As they circled above Pine Ridge Airport, Robert said, "Want to try a landing?" Sarah smiled. "Yes, sir." She lined up the plane with the runway, managed her altitude and airspeed, extended the flaps at the right times, and brought the Cessna down for a smooth landing. "Perfect," Robert said. "You're a natural." Sarah taxied off the runway and parked the plane. As she shut down the engine, she thought about how much had changed in 1 year. She had started as a scared kid on a plane ride she didn't want to take. She had ended up discovering her purpose in life. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the worst days can become the best days. Sometimes the things that scare us most can show us who we really are. She unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed out of the Cessna. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and purple. It was beautiful. Sarah looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Amy. For the books. For the knowledge. For everything." Then she walked toward the airport terminal where her parents were waiting to hear about her lesson. She wasn't just a kid anymore. She was a pilot in training. And someday she would have her license. Someday she would fly professionally. Someday she would help others the way Robert had helped her. But for now, she was just Sarah Chen, an 11-year-old girl who had done something impossible and lived to tell about it. The girl from row 8 who grabbed the microphone and saved 7 lives. 5 years after the emergency landing, Sarah Chen stood at the graduation ceremony at the Aviation Academy. She was 16 years old now, and she had just completed her advanced flight training. The director of the academy called her name. Sarah Chen, graduating with honors. Sarah will be continuing her training to become a commercial airline pilot. The audience applauded loudly. In the front row, Sarah's parents clapped and cheered. Next to them sat Robert Martinez, Sarah's mentor and friend. And next to Robert sat Captain Mike Wilson, who had made a full recovery and returned to flying. Also in the audience were the passengers from that fateful flight 5 years ago. Mrs. Garcia, now 75 years old, had flown in from Arizona. Mr. Johnson had driven from Seattle. Tom Martinez, now graduated from college and working as a journalist, was there with his camera. Dr. Patel had flown in from Denver. They had all stayed in touch with Sarah over the years. They called themselves the Row 8 Club, because Sarah's seat that day had been in Row 8, and she had saved all their lives. After the ceremony, they all gathered for dinner at a restaurant near the airport. "I always knew you would do great things," Mrs. Garcia said, patting Sarah's hand. "I just followed your instructions, Robert," Sarah said. "You're the one who saved us." "We saved each other," Robert said with a smile. Captain Wilson raised his glass. "A toast," he said. "To Sarah Chen. The bravest pilot I ever met. And she wasn't even a pilot yet when we met." Everyone laughed and clinked their glasses. Later, Sarah stood outside the restaurant looking at the airplanes taking off and landing at the nearby airport. Robert came and stood next to her. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked. "I'm thinking about Amy," Sarah said. "And about how strange life is. If she hadn't left those books, I never would have learned about flying. If I hadn't learned about flying, we all would have died that day. Everything happened for a reason. Do you still miss her?" "Every day. But I don't feel sad anymore. I feel grateful. She gave me this gift even though she didn't know it." Robert put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "She would be so proud of the young woman you've become." Sarah looked up at the darkening sky. Stars were starting to appear. Somewhere up there, airplanes were crossing the country, full of passengers who trusted their pilots to keep them safe. Soon, Sarah would be one of those pilots. She would be the one responsible for getting people safely from one place to another. It was a huge responsibility, but she was ready for it. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said. "What's that?" "Every time I fly, I get to help people. Maybe they're going to visit family like I was that day. Maybe they're going on vacation. Maybe they're going home. Whatever the reason, I get to be part of their journey. I get to keep them safe, just like you kept me safe that day." Robert smiled. "You kept yourself safe, Sarah. I just gave you some advice. You did all the hard work. We did it together," Sarah said. "And that's what flying is all about. Working together. Helping each other. No one flies alone." They stood there for a while, watching the planes take off into the night sky. Each one carried people who had their own stories, their own dreams, their own reasons for flying. And soon, Sarah Chen would be up there with them, living her dream and honoring her sister's memory, one flight at a time. The girl from Row 8 had found her wings. This story is dedicated to everyone who has ever overcome fear to help others, and to all the young people who dream of reaching for the sky.